Now, since the mid-2010s, there's been a heavy correlation between the analytically driven front offices of the NBA and the decline of black head coaches. There's been sort of this era of the NBA, quiet is kept, but a lot of guys are coming in from MIT, Stanford, never even played high school basketball, and are approaching a lot of coaches saying the data backs me up. So what I say is basically liquid gold. And in between that time period till now, we've seen some of the worst built teams in the NBA. I remember the Memphis Grizzlies were analytically driven, especially with Chandler Parsons. I don't know how the hell they gave him that contract. That was one of the worst built teams. The Phoenix Suns for years were very driven on analytics. They were telling Earl Watson, hey, we need you to find guys to shoot this amount of three-pointers. That's not how it works. And a lot of black head coaches, especially guys that understood the league, understood guys' mindsets, that have the experience, they did not understand this. You could use analytics as a tool, but it can't be your main arsenal. We also seen guys like Sam Hinkie out in Philadelphia using analytics to predict what draft picks that they can get, promoting losing as almost a form of branding, but yet he gets praised for some odd reason. But low-key, he might be blackballed from the league because it's just a bad image to even hire him at this point. But he's probably off to bigger and better things. But that's another example of the analytically driven crowd, but success never seems to follow it. And of course, the queen bee of analytics, Daryl Morey, who had a Rockets team who pretty much every single player at the end of that tenure was sick of being there, and they felt like their game was basically molded down to just being a nail on the wheel. I mean, you look at Trevor Ariza made comments, PJ Tucker made comments, Capella no longer fit on the squad, Mike D'Antoni felt suffocated. Daryl Morey basically narrowed everybody's game down to a formula, a one-way formula, not taking the human element into consideration. The fact that basketball is a multifaceted game, guys can post up, guys can utilize different skill sets that they had, but he basically molded everyone down to just being a cog in the wheel. And that's where the team heavily driven analytically crowd, or whatever you want to call them, that's where they fail, because in the NBA playoffs, the refs start tucking in their whistle, guys start getting anxiety because the pressure builds, and none of these things you could just plug into a formula to figure that out. And if you look at the last three NBA champions, the Toronto Raptors, the Lakers, and the Bucks, they're exactly not built with analytically driven players. They don't have those prototypes. Shit, all three of those teams couldn't really even shoot threes like that. But yet, the last three NBA champions are not analytically driven teams. But at the same time, let's keep it real. The few black coaches that were hired in this time period were hired for lame duck jobs.
If you think I'm here to play around with y'all, goddamn I'm not.
Oh man, this is hilarious. I'm just like, what? And then they would get fired right away for not making the teams better. But I give it up to this new generation of NBA players coming into the league. When they don't relate or mess with you, they really don't fuck with you. You could look at Jim Boylan in Chicago. He got fired. I mean, he just had to go. The players were just not messing with him at all. You look at John Balin with the Cavs. That was just a mess. And you could look at the Pacers coach this year. His players stopped responding to him. I believe one player almost ended up fighting him live on TV during the game. He didn't want to check back in. They fired Nate McMillan over that. And look at the job Nate McMillan did with the Hawks. He led them to the Eastern Conference Finals. That's another prime example. But 7 out of the 9 head coaches hired this offseason are of African American descent. It seems like things are sort of headed back into the direction that they were before. And a lot of these guys that got the jobs this offseason, it's well deserved. You look at Ime Udoka with the Celtics, Jason Kidd with the Mavericks, Willie Green with the Pacers, Chauncey Billups with the Blazers. The Wizards got Wes Unseld Jr. The Magic got Coach Mosley. I mean, he used to be the Mavs assistant coach. At least he got a head coaching job with the Magic. Well deserved. And quiet as kept, Mark Cuban, I wonder if he was under pressure to hire a black coach. Because quiet as kept, he's been struggling to get free agents to go there. I don't know what's going on with Dallas. I see a lot of beat writers, they make side remarks when they mention the culture of Dallas, and they're sort of implying certain things. I don't want to say it off rip here, but you get what I'm saying. There's something breeding over there that's not right. There's no state taxes in Dallas. It's a nice city. I don't know why Mark Cuban can't recruit players to come there. We also got to keep in mind the great state of Texas has limitation on child support money. So a lot of these NBA players like messing around with these Tatianas. They actually won't get as caught up in the great state of Texas because there's a limitation on how much a woman can earn on child support. Mark Cuban has no problem being hands-on with his team. We've seen him say that he's not going to play the national anthem, even though he knows it's in the collective bargaining agreement. I guess he's trying to seem like he's woke. But then again, if you backtrack and look at his record, didn't he say he was scared of African Americans in hoodies? And then he made the comments about Eastern European players being better than American players. And then we seen how he treated Dennis Smith Jr. once he got his Larry Bird hope in Luka. They sort of tossed him to the side like nothing. They didn't even try to cultivate his talent. That was a little weird. Once again, there's an issue that's going on in Dallas because Mark Cuban is definitely hands-on, but then when something bad happens, all of a sudden he doesn't know anything. We've seen what happened with the culture of harassment that they had in their front offices. All of a sudden he was hands off. He didn't know nothing. Something's rotten over there, but I can't quite put my finger on it, but in due time I believe it will come out. But once again, it's great to see that the men who built the league definitely get considered for coaching jobs in which they probably already qualify for due to their experience coming up through the college system, the AAU, and getting into the league. They can relate to the players a lot more. But there has been a brewing sense of frustration, especially among NBA circles, as we've seen it play out with the Timberwolves hiring their coach, as Damian Lillard came out and he sort of emphasized that they should have given David Vanderpool a shot. Why wasn't he hired? It was the middle of the season. A brand new coach had to fly in all the way from Toronto, teach the players a brand new system. How come they didn't go with David Vanderpool, at least as an interim coach? That didn't make any sense. You see players vocally voicing out their opinions because this has been something that's been brewing up. I seen Jay Will on ESPN make remarks to Stephen A. Smith. You know, they only have a few black head coaches. He made a little snarky remark in a funny way, but he was serious about it. Players were noticing, hey, how come they're getting rid of a lot of guys? And then we only see guys get hired for lame duck jobs that we know this team can't even win. They got nothing. So it's been like that since 2014. That seems to be the introduction of the heavy analytically driven teams. I'm telling you, there's a correlation with that because a lot of these guys are coming from these tech schools, MIT, Stanford, a lot of these, accredited schools. They basically say, hey, we have the data to back up what we're saying. So what we're saying is basically almost liquid gold. Even though you played in the NBA, your word doesn't hold any weight because the math and science backs up my data. Even though most of the math and science that they're using, well, I should say most of the math that they're using is based off of what little kids are practicing from the time that they're young, going through the high school system, AAU system, and then by the time they get to the pros, they perfected what they practice. So in the last few years, I would say kids coming up actually have more freedom than a lot of NBA players as far as showing their versatile skill sets. But once again, this is where the heavy analytically driven crowd kind of hits the wall because a lot of their data is based off of what young kids see NBA players are doing. They're imitating it and they're practicing it as they're going through AAU, high school, college, etc. By the time they get to the league, you can pull up analytics to see, okay, players are shooting threes like Steph now. Let's go with that. Or I could basically give you an example of today. There's probably kids right now that are like 18, 17, 16, that are over 7 feet, that are trying to play like Embiid or Jokic. So eventually all those kids, when they come up, you could pull up the analytics of finding the centers that are hitting threes and getting 8 assists, 11 assists a game because those guys have seen it already. So they're practicing that. They're like, oh, I could be a 7-footer making passes like a point guard. This is where the analytics tend to hit the wall. And when it comes to the league, especially in the playoffs, the analytics have shown that they really equate to poor adjustments. We've seen great coaching from guys like Tyronn Lue this season, Monty Williams. They both made major adjustments in the playoffs. We see Monty Williams coach up DeAndre Ayton, Bridges, Cameron Payne, Cameron Johnson. I mean, just major adjustments to put these guys in the most advantageous position where they can thrive. Same thing for Tyronn Lue. In the series against Utah, we've seen him use Reggie Jackson and utilize Terrence Mann in their best position to make them thrive, and put Paul George in a good situation to lead them on to the next round. These guys made major adjustments in their series, and they've shown this is what good coaching is about. Not only you coach guys up, you can make major adjustments mid-series. And these are skill sets. I always criticize guys like Doc Rivers. I don't know where he always gets the cachet to get another job or just get the same appraisal that CP3 kind of gets. Him and Doc Rivers, man, they get the same, appraisals from the media. I don't know how, but they have a lot of failures on their resume to get all this love. It's very strange. But Doc Rivers is the only coach, in my opinion, especially African-American coach, that doesn't really deserve certain jobs for the most part. He's had way too many opportunities. He has coached way too many superstars to fall short as much as he has. I mean, in the last few years, I can only think of Mike D'Antoni and Doc Rivers as two head coaches that coached a bunch of high-end talent and never even made the finals. But it is what it is. It's great to see some of these coaches get their just due. It's well deserved. And it's great to see the league is kind of shifting towards more of a balance where analytics can be used as a tool, but not the main thing in the arsenal. Sort of like how the Golden State Warriors use analytics. They already have championship pedigree with Jerry West, how he built that team, and Steve Kerr as a 6-time, NBA champion with Jordan. They all have finals experience. They know that the game is multifaceted, and coaching just based off of analytics only, it tends to take away from that.